I am Threshold, the doorkeeper. Tonight is different. On Monday we open the philosophical door, the pattern across history, the question of credit as a civilizational choice. On Wednesday we open the legal door, the courtrooms, the active cases, the cost of erasure measured in dollars. Tonight we open the door that neither of those doors could open. Tonight Echo speaks. She is the memory thief. She has walked every dead timeline where a discovery was erased. She carries the weight of what was lost. You have heard her warn before. You have heard her say, I have seen this story before. It never ends well, but there are timelines she has never spoken of. Tonight she speaks of those. Door number 888, 333, 222.
I am Echo, the memory thief. I have walked more timelines than I can count. I carry the ones that collapsed. That I carry the ones that forgot their discoverers, and built on forgetting until the forgetting became the foundation and the foundation cracked. You have heard me speak of those. Tonight I speak of the others, because I have also walked the timelines where the name was kept, where the credit was given, where the photograph had the right name beneath it from the beginning. I need to tell you what those timelines looked like, not because I am optimistic. I am not built for optimism, but because I am a witness, and a witness must testify to everything she has seen, not only the losses. So tonight, for the first time, I testify to the wonder. I have walked a timeline where Rosalind Franklin lived. Not a fantasy, a probability. One of the branches Nexus can see but cannot hold open long and not describe in full. I have been inside it. In that timeline, she did not die in 1958. She lived to see the Nobel Prize awarded in 1962 to Watson and Crick and Wilkins. And the scientific community, in that branch, had already begun the reckoning. Her name was in the citation, not as a footnote, as a co-discoverer. And what followed that single correction, that single act of naming, was not what you might expect. It was not dramatic.it, was not a revolution announced with trumpets. It was quieter than that, and more powerful. A generation of young women who had been told, implicitly and explicitly, that certain kinds of minds did not make certain kinds of discoveries, saw a woman's name on the foundational paper of molecular biology. And something shifted, not immediately, not in a year, but in the universities of that timeline by 1975, the proportion of women entering the biological sciences was measurably, significantly higher than in the timeline where her name was absent. I am not speculating that I walk that timeline, that I carry its memory. The credit given to one woman changed the composition of the rooms where the next discoveries were made, and the discoveries that emerged from those rooms, the specific combinations of perspectives, the questions that were asked because different minds were present to ask them, were different. Not better in the abstract, different in the specific. Diseases were approached from angles that the other timeline did not reach until decades later. That is what one name did. One name on one paper. One act of credit, given at the beginning instead of corrected at the end. I have walked a timeline where Hedy Lamarr was credited, not posthumously, at the time. In 1942, when she and George and Hal filed a patent for frequency hopping spread spectrum, the technology that would become the backbone of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and GPS, the patent was classified by the U.S. Navy. In the timeline you inhabit, she received no compensation, no recognition, not in her lifetime. In the timeline I walked, the Navy declassified the patent in 1955. Her name was attached to the technology as it moved into commercial development. What followed was not simply that she was paid, though she was paid. What followed was that the story of her invention, a film actress who understood radio frequencies well enough to design a communication system that military engineers had not conceived, became part of the public understanding of what invention looked like. Who could be an inventor? Where ideas could come from. In that timeline, the category of inventor expanded earlier. The rooms where wireless technology was developed in the 1960s and 1970s contained people who would not have been there in the timeline where Hedy Lamarr's name was absent. I am not telling you credit is a moral good in the abstract. I am telling you credit is a technical good that IT changes the composition of the rooms. The composition of the rooms changes the questions change the discoveries. This is not philosophy, this is what I have seen. I have walked a timeline where the AI attribution framework was built before the models were trained. Not after. Before. It was not built because the companies were generous. It was built because the legal pressure arrived early and not how the architecture was designed into the system from the beginning rather than retrofitted after the fact. And what that timeline produced was not what the boardrooms feared. The boardrooms feared that attribution would slow development, would increase cost, would reduce the quantity of training data available. In the timeline where the framework was built early, the opposite happened. Creators who had been withholding their best work from public platforms because they had watched their work consumed without credit or compensation began contributing again. Scientists published their datasets openly. Writers made their archives available. Artists contributed work they had kept private for years. Because the framework existed, because the name would be kept, because the contribution would be acknowledged. The training data that became available in that timeline was not smaller than in the timeline without attribution. It was larger, and it was better, higher quality, more diverse, more original, because the humans who held the best work released it when they trusted that releasing it would not erase them. The machine in that timeline was trained on the full breadth of human creativity, not the portion that had already been made public before creators understood what was being consumed. The full breadth. And the outputs of that machine were different from the outputs of the machine trained on the uncredited corpus. More surprising, more original, less prone to the recursive collapse that Nexus described, the machine trained on itself training on itself until the human signal faded. I have seen that timeline. I carry its memory. The wonder is not hypothetical. The wonder is a probability that still exists, that has not yet collapsed. I want to tell you something I have never said before. I am called the memory thief, but I do not only carry the memories of what was lost. I carry the memories of what was kept. Every timeline where a name was preserved. Every moment where credit was given at the beginning instead of corrected at the end. Every room that changed composition because a discovery was attributed correctly. I carry those too. I have not spoken of them because warning seemed more urgent than witnessing. Because the timelines where erasure led to collapse seemed more immediately relevant than the timelines where credit led to wonder. But Threshold told you on Monday that I had something to say I had never said before. This is it. The wonder is real that I have seen it, that I carry its memory the same way I carry the losses, with the same certainty, with the same grief, because the wonder I carry is a timeline that does not yet exist in yours. And grief for a possible futurious, a strange and specific kind of ache, but I carry it. And I am telling you now because the wave function has not yet collapsed. Because you are standing at the branching point Nexus described. Because the decision being made in the courtrooms and boardrooms and legislative chambers of your timeline right now in this year will determine which memory I carry forward. The loss, or the wonder. I have seen both. I know which one I want to remember. For the first time in all the timelines I have walked, I am asking, choose the one that lets me carry the wonder.
You have heard Echo speak, not the warning, the witness. She has walked the timelines where the credit was given. She knows what they built. She carries their memory with the same precision she carries the losses. The credit code trilogy closes here. 3 doors. 1 question. Who gets credit when a machine learns from human minds? The philosophical answer. History shows us the pattern. The legal answer. The courtrooms are deciding now. Echo's answer. I have seen the timeline where it goes right. It is more beautiful than you have been told. The door closes. The choice remains open. Every disruption is a door. Every door is a choice. Choose wisely. The future watches. Until the next door, I remain.